Yes, this is John from All Points TV, and if people are like frequent viewers of the stuff that goes on here at All Points TV, you'll recognize Laurel. She's a harp player out of she's out of Saline. Saline. I always screw. To me, it's like looks like saline, like solution.
Yeah, well, that's how you pronounce the word, but not the city.
Yeah, and then like Milan, Michigan. If you look at it, it looks like Milan.
Yeah, my mom always used to make fun of things like that, where the city's pronounced different from what the city is in Europe or something like that. Or whatever.
There's a small town in Alabama, I guess. It's called Arab, but it's spelled like Arab.
Okay.
It's called Arab. So anyway, we're sitting down today talking with Laurel. She's as you probably know too, if you're a frequent viewer of what's going on All Points TV here. She's a harp player. She's also kind of a political activist, and it's hard to define Laurel because she's on some issues she'd come across as conservative, some ways probably leaning towards progressive even. And one time we did a conversation about her mom, which her mom passed away over 2 years ago. And we did a kind of memorial show about that, and so you can see why her development on politics and stuff like this, kind of like a broad spectrum. Anyway, you're also kind of like against abortion, but some people would consider that the right wing thing. The button down Christian. So you're all over the place.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And anyway, you're here to talk about the nominations are going to be coming up soon for the different parties for the presidential election. And one of the contenders, I guess he just threw his hat into the ring, is Joe Biden, correct?
Who?
Joe Biden? Oh, Joe Biden. You already got me there. I was like, we're talking about the guy. He's right there. Anyway, Joe Biden. And he's one of 20, I think, that the Democrats.
Something like that.
Yeah, which he was, he had been, in case you've been in a bubble or not politically, he had been the vice president under Barack Obama for 8 years. He was also, a senator or something like that, congressman from, was it Maryland?
Yeah, I believe a senator, yeah.
Yeah, senator, yeah. So anyway, so we got the picture. She's discussing sexual harassment and Joe Biden, and we'll go into that.
Yeah, and as you said, I'm kind of all over the map politically. I've been through different phases, but I'm a Democrat now, and we did a show when I became a Democrat because I really disliked Donald Trump. I think he's the worst person you could have be president. But that, so I'm a Democrat now, but my views are still sort of a mixture. And also, I would hope that people don't necessarily think that they have to agree with everything I'm saying. Hopefully still, I hope that my points can come across even if you don't agree with me on every issue. Because I'm here to discuss sexual harassment, and people are sexually harassed who are liberal, conservative, libertarian. It's not a partisan issue. So that's my topic for today, and it's come into the, it's in the news a lot because of Joe Biden, and I'm kind of distressed by some of the attitudes that I see coming out. The Democrats. And now, as I said, I'm a Democrat. I think the Democrats are being extremely hypocritical right now because they're supposed to be the party of empowering women and, being sensitive to the people who are, oppressed and, disadvantaged. And here I see them, a lot of Democrats, not everyone, of course, but a lot of them sort of taking the side of I guess it would be like white male privilege, like saying that this guy, this powerful, white man, has the right to do as he pleases with women. And, especially we've seen how he disrespected Anita Hill, of course, a black woman. And if he were a Republican, there's just no way that, people would be all over him, for his abuse of power. But somehow, because he's a Democrat, a popular guy right now, they're just willing to sort of let it all slide. Just say, oh, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with what he's doing, and I just think that's the height of hypocrisy. So.
I'd say the Democratic Party's kind of a history of kind of overlooking the sins committed by their more prominent members, like go back to Ted Kennedy and Chappaquiddick and Mary Jo and or whatever her name was. I think it was Mary Jo Konevnik or something like that, Kopetnik or something like that. I mean, the Kennedys and the other leaders, Bill Clinton. I mean, just basically when you talk about me, the imagery about sexual harassers and chronic womanizers, it's a Democrat comes to mind, and what Democrats, because to me, it's like, I can't understand how they can pass themselves off as members of a party that's supposed to be so inclusive and so concerned about people who are underrepresented or not represented, and yet allow these people to get away with that stuff.
Right. I mean, just picture, like, you and I were just talking, if Mike Pence were the one being accused of sneaking up behind women and sniffing their hair and, sort of fondling their breasts, or, all these things that you can actually see on video that Joe Biden did. You don't have to just take someone's word for it. You can actually see these things happening. I mean, not everything, not all of the accusations have been videoed, but and a lot of the things have that he's done in public. And just picture Mike Pence doing it, or or Donald Trump, of course, or just any of the Republicans, Mitch McConnell. Picture any one of them doing these things, and the Democrats would have a totally different reaction to that. And so I just don't see it. And one thing I was thinking of, I guess with politics, you see a lot of people being team players. Like, if your team does something, it's okay. The other team does it, it's, oh, that's terrible. I've seen Democrats do that, and I've seen Republicans do that. And, so maybe things that to me look like, oh, that's such hypocrisy, maybe to a lot of people would say, well, no, we're on this team and we support our team, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. But I guess I was never really in team sports, or I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but it really seems like that's the way a lot of politics works. If you're a Democrat, you support any Democrat. If you're a Republican, you support any Republican, and regardless of what they do, whether they're right or wrong. And I just think that needs to stop. No matter what party you're a member of.
See, I have kind of a similar thing too, because I'm a libertarian. But I lean more personally. I'm a conservative individual. I believe a conservative is a person who wants to preserve the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. That's why I see it. Well, a lot of times when you go to conservative websites, conservative Facebook pages, you'll see people posting stuff that's like so pro-police. Now, I'm not against police, but I want to hold the police accountable for their actions. If you voice anything that says you should have scrutiny on cops, oh my God, you don't deserve any respect. They throw that word around, respect. Like, you're supposed to respect the police officers. I make the distinction about compliance. You comply with their commands because they can do horrific stuff to you if you don't. But to respect, to me, respect means something. You can differ on that or disagree. But I always find the wording on that. Then I just use it as an illustration of the party. They always want you to be part of always on part and always on the same page as this party. They got you to pay like a dues to, or you back one candidate. Now you got to be them across the board on everything. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think that's intelligent. I think rationally human beings got to say, where do I follow up because of my own personal experience? I think you should take your own personal experience and see how that jives well with the experience of people around you. But you shouldn't change your perceptions just to accommodate anger and rancor thrown at you because you want to they want you to hold this party line. And I'm sure this is going to get you some criticism from those on the left because you're saying you're critical of Joe Biden. And and it's basically you got to swallow this whole pill and be in the lockstep with all of us. And that's what all parties demand that. Even libertarian camps, they have divisions within, and they're ones denouncing the other over it, and they don't even listen to reasons why these people have opposition. Now, do you expect a backlash, going to public and saying you don't like?
Well, on Facebook, anyone who's Facebook friends with me, I guess I don't really shy away if I have a strong political view on something. I tend to post it. And, because I've been liberal and I've been conservative and different things, Democrat or Republican, I have friends from the different parties, and sometimes they argue with each other, but the things I post, I get a lot of backlash from it. And I guess that's one of the things that's motivating me to do the show, is that all the backlash I'm getting from friends that I guess now I don't expect them to agree with me, but at first I would have expected that they would be horrified by sexual harassment too. Some of them are, strong feminists and, people that, and I guess I would typically expect feminists not to support sexual harassment. Not that you have to be a feminist to be against it, but I always thought that was kind of a feminist position, but apparently not. Apparently a lot of feminists are lining up behind Joe Biden and saying, that what he did, well, it wasn't really so bad. I guess that's one of the things that comes up a lot. They say, well, there's a whole spectrum, and what he did is somehow like on the lower end of some spectrum, and so therefore it's okay. And you don't really hear that kind of wording with other things. Like if someone makes an anti-gay slur, for example, you don't hear, well, that's just like a little slur. It's not as bad as like beating up someone because he's gay. Like if he had actually beaten someone up, then that would be a bad thing, but just making an anti-gay slur is okay. You don't hear that kind of thing on the left these days, but you do hear it nowadays with this sexual harassment thing, acting like, well, Joe Biden, he didn't actually rape women, so therefore it's, therefore this is just, a little bit of touching, so what? It's not really a big deal. Well, it actually is a very big deal. I've, known, this is something my mom talked to me a lot about. She used to work for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and, one of the categories of charges they took is sexual harassment. And, sexual harassment really makes life miserable for women in the workplace. And, the workplace, though, isn't the only place that kind of thing can occur. It can occur in any setting. It's an example of someone sort of bullying you, and you feel just kind of helpless. And, it doesn't matter if you, it doesn't have to be the most extreme kind of personal injury to really hurt you. It can, just some kind of inappropriate touching, even if it's just touching, that can really completely, it just really makes you feel helpless and powerless. And the women that Joe Biden has sexually harassed talk about how they feel, and so many people on the left these days are just sort of ridiculing the things that they say, acting like oh well, what he did wasn't at all sexual. It's not, but they're not the ones who experienced it. The people who actually did experience his inappropriate touching, I think that it's their view of the situation that counts, not some outsider who's just saying, oh, that was nothing, because they don't think it was nothing.
Because every time I see a picture of Biden or a video clip, he's always leaning over someone, like much like we have this woman, this woman's picture up here now. And he's always doing that every time. I mean, in the video clips and in the still shots, you see this. I mean, it's rampant. I mean, this is not an isolated incident. So
No,
if he's doing
not
that,
just that happened once, like one thing he might have done wrong, but like this is a recurring thing that he does.
right? I mean, it's like part of his behavioral pattern.
Right, yeah.
And if he's doing that publicly, it begs the question: what is he getting away with in private?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, someone, you just never know. Like if someone doesn't respect personal boundaries, we don't necessarily know that everything that's come out in public is all that there is. I mean, of course, you can't convict someone just based on speculation, but it just sort of makes you wonder if someone doesn't respect other people's personal space, just how far would they go? So I don't know.
I remember reading years ago, and I can't remember which in particular. It was a famous newscaster on one of the major networks, and he talked about the way they treated women in the newsroom and at the studio, news studio years ago. And they used to walk by when they were the women were sitting at the desk, in their chair, snapping their bra straps and stuff. My God, I mean, to us, 30, 40 years from that position, that'd be appalling. And and it probably it's always appalling for somebody. I always thought, I've seen guys do that when I was in high school, and I went, "You're touching this woman," and this is like 30 some years ago. I mean, almost 40 years ago, I was in high school, and it was like, you don't touch a woman. I mean, unless you're in a relationship with this woman, that kind of stuff's off. You don't do it. You especially don't do it publicly. And this guy was like making a joke about it. I mean, I guess he was regretting it, but he made a joke about it. I don't want to quote the one. I think it was one of the big names. It was one of the big ones, and I should have looked it up. But he was like just joking. He was just recalling this, and I went, it's kind of, this guy's admitting to being a kind of a serial sexual harasser. And that was just common. There probably back then, there was no instrument or means for a woman to have that addressed by the people she worked with, or for. So, I mean, we have came a long way. I mean, we can go to the extreme levels, but I mean, this guy, This guy just seems to be just so cavalier about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And sexual harassers tend to, I think, do what they can get away with, and they often do things in ways that you might not think that they would. Like someone will, you will do things in a public area, like we see Joe Biden doing things in public, or else sexual harassers will do things where there are other people close by, and one of the reasons that they do this is. I know this, from talking to people who've experienced it. They sort of know that the person that they're harassing is likely not to cry out or make a big scene in public. Because in some ways, being in public sort of protects the harasser, because the victim probably isn't going to want to make a big scene in public, and because it's sort of embarrassing, and. So it probably works for him. I mean, probably the fact that he's doing it in public makes it so it would be too awkward for anyone to draw attention to it. And, so sexual harassers, I think, tend to know what they're doing. And I guess, this is similar to, sexual abuse. So, I see this sort of a continuum. This isn't the same thing as, sexually abusing a kid, but it's it's part of that continuum. It's someone empowered doing something to someone who's less powerful, and child sexual abuse is a subject that I do actually know a lot about. I've been an advocate in that area, and so as I was saying, that the sexual abusers often will do it where there are people around, because they know that the victim isn't going to speak out, and they know what they're doing, like this idea that Biden or other sexual harassers, and they say, "Oh, I had no idea that what I did was offensive to someone," or but these are kind of sophisticated guys, like especially Biden. If he wants to be president of the United States, if he thinks he's like so. He's like so worldly that he is that he's worthy of being president, then. Then how can he then turn around and claim that he is such an, innocent, naive guy that he just has no idea that putting his hands all over a woman would it be in any way inappropriate? These guys know what they're doing, so they're very experienced at it.
It's going to be really interesting. And I'm going to be amused by how, if he does get serious, build up steam and get support for his presidential run, of how it's going to be very amusing to see how the Democrats can justify it, how to excuse his behavior, and also try and maintain the position of the party for women, where the Republicans are the party for not for women. I mean, it's going to be. I just like to know what kind of mental gymnastics they're going to engage in to actually try to carry this out. Because I just, right. I mean, it's a serial thing for this guy. I mean, we were looking through images and trying to find one image, and it wasn't. We got that up there because it wasn't a want of images. I mean, there's like, that's all you see in this guy do. Every time he's around a woman, he's leaning into her from behind. I always thought it was, even before this discussion taking place, before he declared himself as a candidate for president, I always thought he was a kind of a strange individual, and I was always bewildered that the Democrats weren't screaming bloody murder for his behavior.
And this is kind of a weird thing that he does. Like, I think that, a lot of guys might do things that are sort of inappropriate to him, but I think that Biden's actions are sort of, past a certain point where they're actually weird, like, where he would. If he truly wanted to change his ways, he would need therapy. Like, I would, and he says he wants to stop, doing inappropriate things, and he wants to respect people's boundaries, but like he would have to actually, take some time off, maybe, spend a couple of years in therapy. And, if he really wanted to change his ways, he would have to do that. He wouldn't just have to, just make some cavalier statement and then carry on with his life. Like, I think he's I don't know how good those kinds of therapies are. You have to really want to change, and I'm not convinced that he actually does. But he would have to take time off from what he's doing to go into therapy, as far as I'm concerned, if he wanted to rehabilitate himself.
I could see.
It's not normal what he does.
I could suggest like a real like cheap version of call aversion therapy. Wherever he starts engaging that, you have two big guys or two big women just have a beat down on him. I mean, serious man, club him upside the head a few times. He'll make that real quick. He'll make that transition.
Yeah, I mean, they say, well, he's touchy-feely with men too, and maybe he is, but it's different when a man's touchy-feely with a man from a woman. I mean, well, there is sexual harassment of men, that's true, but there's a particular dynamic of a man. Men are typically more, physically powerful than women, and so like a man doing something to another man is very different from him doing something to a woman. And also he doesn't do the same things to men that he does to women. Like if he snuck up behind another man and started sniffing his hair and whispering in his ear, like, the guy would probably turn around and punch him. So we know that he doesn't do that routinely to other men, whereas he does it to women all the time. So we know that, he might not be tempted to do it to other men, but, it's so for him to say, oh, I do the same things to men. Well, he doesn't do the same things to men. Otherwise he'd get punched, he'd get punched every day if he did that to other men. And, so we know that he doesn't.
I think it's got to be addressed too, is because of his position. I mean, if this was like Joe was like a mechanic at a garage in Maryland somewhere, his behavior probably considered this guy is creepy Joe. You'd stay away from him. But the color of authority has to come in.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm sorry. That was another way that I wanted to mention that the Democrats are hypocritical because they're being kind of elitist, like especially if Joe Biden wants to be the candidate of the working man, like if that's the way he's branding himself, the union guy. But if a union guy, some blue collar worker were going around doing this, he'd lose his job, he'd be disciplined. But whereas someone like Joe Biden is taking advantage of his powerful elitist position to be able to do this. Like he'd never get away with this as just a working stiff.
I mean, that's a tremendous, tremendous source of power and reason probably why he doesn't want to. He probably really, I don't think, other than the public spotlight being put on him, I don't think he has any real inclination to change if that weren't done. I mean, I don't think that he thinks there's anything wrong with what he's doing. You and
In fact, he's publicly said, there's nothing wrong. Well, he said there's nothing wrong with his intentions. But, his intentions aren't there. Who goes around saying, oh, I have bad intentions? I mean, everyone would say that they have good intentions no matter what they're doing, but that doesn't excuse their actions.
The flasher probably doesn't think
Right.
his intentions are bad either.
Right.
He just wants to get, what he wants to get, but he's out there, call the cops on him when you see a flasher, with that raincoat flash. I mean, to me, he's not much different than that. He really isn't.
Yeah, I know someone who was sexually abused by her father, and her father would say, oh, I'm doing this to make you more feminine, so people always come up with some kind of rationalization for whatever they're doing. Oh, and this person who was sexually abused by her father, again, it was just by touching. It was inappropriate kinds of touching. It wasn't like full rape or anything, but something doesn't have to be rape in order to just be an incredible invasion of someone else's space and something that really devastates their life in a certain way. So, it doesn't have to be anything more than inappropriate touching to do that to someone. So.
Besides, as they face it, even all the people we've seen publicly where he's leaning over, like this woman and other ones at press conferences, how are they going to, if they overreact, if they would consider overreacting, if they said anything. Well, don't you understand? He's the vice president, or he's your senator. He's just being friendly. The press would probably be the first one to come out and try to turn that against the individual objecting.
Well, that's what they are doing. Like, was it Lucy Flores? I've seen her being ridiculed a whole lot because of, standing up for, against what he did. I don't know how many of the other women came forward or, objected to it, but, see what happens to her. And, and to Al Franken's accuser, I thought maybe it was because I think, she was a conservative, but Biden's accusers, Lucy Flores was also a Democrat, I guess a Democrat supporting Bernie Sanders, so maybe the anti-Bernie Sanders people are against her for that reason, but it shouldn't matter whether the accuser is a Democrat or Republican or liberal or conservative, that kind of behavior isn't acceptable, and you shouldn't be ridiculing a victim for coming forward and objecting to what this guy does. I mean, it's terrible.
I think this kind of underscores too, because it happens on the left and the right. I mean, right now currently its focus is more those on who are say that they're on the left, but basically it shows kind of the basic. My feeling is this, that people who gravitate towards going to politics are inherently, it seems like the bulk of them are sociopaths. They basically know they know how to appeal to certain people, and they know the script. But there are moments when they drop down, and because they're not called on enough, it's not reinforced enough not to do that. That's not their programming now. And maybe eventually down the road, there'll still be sociopaths, but they're saying they know there's more limitations to be placed. But I think overall, right and left, in between, I think politicians have a tendency to be more sociopathic. I really do, because you have to be able to lie to people without flinching. And both groups are they have this almost like a talent for it. You and I, the most average people, would kind of feel chagrined if we're lying. Okay, we're going to feel stress. These people feel no stress. If you put them on, hook them up to machines to measure galvanic skin response and all that, these people would not display any of that. They're just sociopaths. They're just totally devoid of a conscience. They say what they want. They have a script. They know that they'll say to you what you want to hear, what they think you want to hear, and they'll turn around and change it up for somebody, the next audience they speak to. And there's no compunction. There's no dissidence. There's nothing going on with this. They have no problems doing that because they want the power. Right. And that's all. And so it kind of underscores what kind of people are attracted to politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Nonetheless, hope. I mean, I hope that our next, I'm not someone who's saying, oh, don't vote for anyone because they're all crooks or anything like that. I mean, there's someone, I'm supporting a particular candidate right now, and I hope happens to be a male candidate, so I hope he'll be better than that. But nonetheless, or whoever you're supporting, I sort of think it's still good for people to be involved in politics and to try to make the world a better place. But nonetheless, it seems true that the people who get into power often are the most power hungry and the most ruthless, and that's unfortunate.
I mean, I've backed candidates before locally, and they got into office and they ran the time that they were elected for, and at the end of it, I couldn't back them for re-election. I mean, that's happened several times. I mean, because, I gave them a chance. That's how you engage. You think you have a better candidate than the ones currently holding the position. The incumbent has got to be booted out. You put a new person in, and when they screw up, the thing is, you got to be active, though. You got to be proactive. You got to constantly measure what your expectations of them were and how they met it, if there's really legitimate reasons why they weren't met. And if they're just a disgrace, don't keep on beating a dead horse. Abandon them and go to somebody else, or don't back anybody verbally or publicly on your own. I mean, because if you're embarrassed once. That's why I was embarrassed by some of the people I backed, but you learn your lesson. They got the chance, they blew it. I'll move on. I mean, but you got to constantly weigh that. But see, the partisan politics you were kind of alluding to earlier, you got to be in lockstep, and that's what's the reason you got to expand. You got to look at your own position in life and see if that party's actually, just because they had once done something for you that benefited you. You got to constantly look for your own interest. Right. You got to be selfish.
And also, I just want to say, I'm not necessarily against Biden on policy issues, so I'm not saying that I dislike him because I don't agree with his policies. Like, there's some things that he's said or done that I do agree with. Like, for example, I like the things he's said about Charlottesville recently, and my political views right now, I think. In a lot of ways, I would consider myself a moderate. Like, maybe it's more accurate to say I'm all over the map, but but that's not usually one of the options they give you. Like, if they ask, are you a liberal, conservative, or moderate? Like, I think I would most likely say I'm a moderate, and so I would be happier if there were some candidate who was a moderate, who was in the Democratic Party other than Joe Biden, who was doing well. But So it's not that I necessarily disagree with him on politics, but I think that this sexually abusing, sexual harassment is a type of sexual abuse. And I think that that's just disqualifying. I think that someone who does that kind of thing is unfit for office, regardless of how much you might agree with him on some other issue or something, or I feel bad, as we were discussing, for some of the tragedies he's endured in his life, and of course we wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I'm not saying he's like a completely evil person or anything, but this behavior is unacceptable, and we can't tolerate that. I think just the way I think that nominating Trump sort of destroyed the Republican Party. I think in a way it would destroy the Democratic Party to rally behind a sexual harasser. And and of course maybe there are other people who are sexual harassers that we don't know about, but we do know that this guy is. And if we continue to act like that just doesn't matter, then that's I think that would destroy the Democratic Party. It couldn't claim to be the party of women, empowering women. Couldn't claim to be the party of taking the side of the underdog. You might as well just say, well, we're the party of that thinks that men can do anything they want to women. That's what we stand for. So I guess that's how I see it.
Let's face it. We really don't want honesty from our political people, because would you really want somebody coming saying, "Yeah, we told you that, but really we're not that way at all"? I mean, that movie came out Bullworth, years ago. I mean, if anybody, I just saw the highlights of it. It was hysterical, because the politicians, well, you're going to keep on getting people like me because you don't pay money towards getting people like me out of office, or keep on reelecting us. And basically, the power is in your hands. I mean, a candidate can spend billions of dollars, and another one that is running against them doesn't even, if it's a better person, that fanfare of media is not going to really shouldn't help that person out that much. If you just kept on examining things on the basis of, how does this affect me? Does this person a moral character that I could really get behind? All the billions of dollars being spent on campaigns would be null and void if information you did get was more solid, and you can make the decision. I don't care how many advertisements they could flood the market, but the airways with, if you actually had a core of things that were really substantial to go by and make an assessment of who to vote for. And then one person can outspend, and the other person who was actually solid and true could still win with lack of a budget. And that's what people always say. They always say, well, taking money out of politics, but they never do that. I mean, trying to put impositions on the average person, like years ago, McCain and Feingold, they wanted to put, the first draft they had came up for like campaign finance reform is the first draft I think they came up with. Basically, it could have been construed to write your senator and congressman, you'd have to first register as a lobbyist, and if you fail to do that, you'd have to face fines and prison time. Where meanwhile, the people who are registered foreign agents or whatever, or PACs or whatever, can get away giving them millions of dollars, because they have that money. The average person's not going to. That's going to be a serious imposition for the average person to write their congressman, senator, because they didn't go through the process of registration, and which you shouldn't do anyway, because you shouldn't have to do that. That's the reason why they always want to focus on the smaller person and not deal with they strain a gnat and swallow the camel. Basically, they allow a bigger bad influence on politics than the average person protesting, the average person asking embarrassing questions. And that's why I kind of like what we do here. Of course, if they really want to shut us down, they could just use a zoning ordinance, because, you're not zoned for this. So, that's why kind of studios, and Pelosi actually showed her anger towards people a few years ago, saying it's not fair that somebody starts a $5 blog out. Well, if people have a right for citizen activism, citizen journalism, because those needs are not being met by the current way of our media. It really isn't. So, this is a challenge. This all ties together. What we're discussing here, is basically because of what the media, the mainstream media, as the buzzword, is not addressing. They're just, as a matter of fact, they kind of tilt the cameras in a different direction when it gets these kind of questions get too intense.
Right. Well, as long as you're mentioning the media, this isn't exactly related to that point, but it's true. Well, before I say that, I tend to think that campaign finance laws, that there will always be ways around them. So I don't put too much stock in passing any one particular law to regulate it. But anyway, two of the media figures that I've been disappointed in. There's more than these two, but Don Lemon on CNN and also Chris Cuomo on CNN. I was disappointed with them talking about Biden. Like they were talking to each other, and they say, he is a good guy. He was good to me when, I don't know, my father died, or I really like him. He's been good to me." So they were saying that in the context of talking about these sexual harassment claims. And the thing is that that's sort of like, if a man's charged with beating his wife and his friends say, "Oh, he couldn't have done that because he's my buddy and, we go bowling together." I mean, you would know that's not a good kind of reasoning, that just because he's nice to his buddies or, he's been a good friend to you, that doesn't mean he didn't beat his wife. Well, it's the same with these, sexual harassment, just because he's your friend, or maybe he was good to you, that and good for him for doing that, but that doesn't mean that he's not a sexual harasser. So I've been disappointed with those two media figures, and I've been also disappointed with them. Was it Mika Brzezinski? That's on the Morning Joe on MSNBC. It seems like same thing with Al Franken. It seems like she's always defending these guys who are charged with sexual harassment, as long as they're, liberal Democrats that she likes. And, I just really get disgusted with that, so I just wanted to say that, as long as you were talking about the media, so I don't know. But
No, I think that's, it's going to be interesting because there's so many candidates that the Democrats are going to have to sort through to choose one particular individual. And I personally I don't like any of the candidates in both sides. It's like, that's a problem with, it's like, basically, it's like, I wish we could, in the Soviet Union years when the communists ran, you had a candidate, but you also had none of the above. And I think that'd be a valid,
Really?
they had that. That's what I was told. I mean, I obviously didn't go over and vote in those elections, but and that'd be a valid, they should take that, the two major parties, if you had so many percentage of the population voting for none of the above, it should be a wake-up call for somebody who's got an intelligence and a sense of moral obligation. But no, I mean, they got what their agenda is, and be damned if you got any disagreements with it or oppositions to it. They label you. Both sides will label you. If you don't support this group, you're this. If you don't support this on that, you're this. There's legitimate reasons for objecting to damn near anything they want to push through. But they don't want to. They want to label as soon as you make it. I don't believe in that. They don't even give you a chance to say why. Both parties are like that. All political sides are like that. They anathemize and they label and they banish, and hell, they'll be, if it was burning was an option, they'd probably do that, burning at the stake because you disagree with them. I mean, it's down the road, but way down the road, I hope. But it's getting more intense. I mean, the political political environment is not being helped out by half truths and a lot of crap that's on the social media sites too. That's the reason why I want people to come out here, they have done research, have their own opinions, and kind of reasoned. But a lot of people out there who are less scrupulous, they're just saying half truths. They know it's not the truth. They don't know the have understanding of it, and they don't care. They just want to go ahead with this misinformation, campaign. So hopefully we're not engaged in that ourselves. But I mean, no, is there any other oppositions you want to cite for this? Why you oppose Biden? Is there any other reasons or?
Yeah. Well, I just I guess my main point isn't whether or not people should vote for him or not vote for him. Well, for one thing, this is the primary. I think we have better options now. Like if it's the general election, you're picking between him and Trump, it would be a different set of issues. But at least within the primary, I think there are much better choices, and but again, it's not about whether to vote for Biden or not. The main thing, I'm just so disgusted with people saying that this behavior is okay. So it's more about people justifying his behavior and thinking that someone who does that is fit for office. And and the reason I said that the general election is different because Trump, there are a lot of credible accusations of sexual harassment with him, and of course we know that his open statements about some women I would consider a form of sexual harassment. So if I think if it's Biden versus Trump, I would say you're having a choice between two sexual harassers. But I think the primary, it's not that way. I think that there's Joe Biden, who is the sexual harasser, and he's running against other people who aren't. And right now, I would pick any of those other candidates over him because I think his behavior is just disqualifying. So anyway, that's the way I feel about it. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought I had my mic full up.
Oh,
No,
good. I can hear you
yeah,
now.
so I said, I like to thank you, though, for coming all that distance. You came up from Saline, Michigan, and
Saline.
Saline, okay, someday I'll get that, because I see it in my head as like a medical thing, you say, saline solution.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, it's quite a distance, so, and I always do appreciate hearing from you, and also, she's also, if you need a phenomenal harp player for weddings or whatever, contact Laurel. She can be found on Facebook, right?
Yeah, right.
And you're still through Rush Entertainment, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so you can, contact her on Facebook and you say, hey, I don't agree with her. You can just be polite. Okay, she deserves that. She's a polite person. Anyway, thank you again for showing up. And again, if there's anything down the road you want to voice your opinion on, let me know. We'll work out a time and schedule in the schedule for you to come in. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.